Hi, everyone, and welcome to Node Foundation's Enterprise Conversations. I'm Tracy Hines, Education and Community at the Node Foundation. And here today, I've got Thomas Hunter.
Hi.
How's it going, Thomas?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. So really excited to have you today. Thank you for stopping by. I think people are going to be really excited to hear about all the work that y'all have been doing. So I think we'll just hop right into that. So tell us a little more about your role at OpenTable.
Yeah. So I'm a principal software engineer. When I first started at the company, I was working on the search team. So we have this search project. It's written entirely in Node, of course. It's an API. It has a website, and it consumes data from a bunch of upstream services and attaches the data and responds. And so we also did some new work recently where we introduced Elasticsearch. And so now we're able to sort of freely search for any sort of phrase that you would want to type into the website. Previously, the search project was a bit simpler. It was almost like a directory of restaurants. So you could search for like food based on cuisine, but not more granular details. However, about a month ago, I moved to a new team. And so this is like a platform team for front-end projects. So all the front-end projects in OpenTable are written in Node. And so we're now working on coming up with standardization, creating standard libraries, just kind of getting everything tamed.
Ah, nice. Yeah, I've seen quite a few companies end up moving over to that, especially in terms of the platform for the front end. It just seems to be a really good fit. And I know I use OpenTable quite a bit. Hopefully people have noticed the changes, but that's exciting. So how long have you been in Node?
Yeah, it's me personally. I've been using it since early 2012, which I think was back in the version 0.6 days.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm a veteran. So I actually switched from like the land of PHP MySQL, over to like Node and NoSQL engines and stuff like that. The first project I built was just this multiplayer online game called Cobalt Caliber. Previous versions of this game were like written in PHP, and the browsers would need to keep requesting information to see updates, and just kind of like this slow process, and I would like thrash the disk in my laptop and eventually crash the machine. But switching over to Node has made it much easier to build sort of these real-time applications where you're maybe pushing data around. So for example, with this project, users will pull up this website, they'll be able to walk around in real time, they can see other people moving around in real time, they're establishing WebSocket connections, and all the data that's shared is kept in memory, and just a much better experience for building these more lively applications.
Yeah. So that's how long you've been working in it. That's interesting because I also like to see sort of how people are involved as part of Node if they are. So I am lucky enough to have worked with you a little bit. But what's your community involvement like with Node?
I mean, personally?
Yeah.
So I do, I certainly we're working on the Node exam project together.
Yeah.
I like to give a lot of talks to the community, so I've given talks at I think SF Node, SF Redis, SF Microservices. Of course, I'm trying to leave SF a little bit, so I'm going to speak at Node down in was it Argentina? So I'll be speaking at a Node. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, sorry, I was just excited about Argentina.
Oh.
All right, and were we still there?
And my microphone keeps cutting out.
Oh no. Okay. Yeah, so that's, I think that that's really helpful for people to end up knowing, sort of the individuals who are working at these places and sort of like their role and context in the world of Node. And then sort of, along those lines, um, for how long and how has OpenTable been taking advantage of Node?
Yeah, so I've been at the company for 2 years, and so I had to ask around a little bit to get this information. But my teammate, Jono, he was able to send me a link to a commit, and we think this might be the first commit for Node within the company. So this commit was made on June 19th, 2013, and it was made to the restaurant API. And so that's an API that we still use today. It's still up and running. And before that, I think everything that we did was written in C# and Java. And we still do have C# and Java applications for like the deepest recesses of the company. But anything that touches the client, anything more shallow, is probably written in Node.
Interesting. So as someone who works in the education side of Node, are employees brought in, hired on to work in Node, or do they end up taking existing employees within the company, maybe writing other languages, and teach them Node?
We do a little bit of both. So I was hired to work directly on Node from the beginning, but we do have some engineers that do switch over to Node. I can think of one right now. He's been on the C# side of things for a while, but then he started writing Node as of the last few months. And it's very rare that people move from Node to the other languages. So the Node presence at OpenTable is certainly growing.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of, on to our next question. What impact has Node had on OpenTable and your team?
Good question. So the biggest, I think one of the best benefits of using Node is that it's much easier to create prototypes or even to start any application from scratch. So a more concrete example of this would be, if you want to consume data from another service, and that service is returning you JSON data, if you're using a more tightly typed language like Java or C#, all this data that you're retrieving, you're going to need to coerce into some sort of internal model representation. So if you're doing work like that, it just requires a bit more overhead and developer time to write the code to serialize these objects into memory. And so if you're using Node, for example, you can simply grab that data, JSON parse it, and you've now got an in-memory representation of this object. And it's just very easy to do that, and you can quickly get these applications running. A little bit of a side effect to that, though, is that if you attempt to access properties that don't exist, you're going to have potentially runtime errors. So there's a little trade-off in that regard. Somebody else explained to me that once we started using Node, our pool of backend developers increased almost overnight. And so, for the longest time, we were mostly C# and Java backend services. And so, maybe we only have, like 20 engineers or whatever. But if we have like 50 engineers who know JavaScript, then these engineers are all able to contribute to the backend. And so,
wow.
Yeah, so just very quickly we're able to, get more backend work done, which is great because then, front-end engineers are no longer held up. Perhaps they're waiting on a back-end team to, expose a new endpoint or host this application they want to build. But now that front-end developers are able to work on that stuff, we're able to more quickly innovate and get services running. And each teams can then sort of own their own stack. Like they can own the deployment process. They can integrate continuous integration, continuous deployment. They can own like every step of the way. So it's really empowering for the individual developer to use that approach.
Yeah, I've actually seen that firsthand at some of the companies I've worked at, how when you get the opportunity to get to to have access. You don't necessarily, you get to own the stack yourself, or if you have access to that, how quickly you can get things done. It can be a little overwhelming, but it's pretty awesome to be able to not have to go to another team to ask permission for something.
Absolutely. There's also the risk of, getting, PagerDuty calls are now more applicable to the front-end engineer.
Yeah, that was one thing. It's like, oh, well, we never had, Page in 2 years, and then once you start owning that stuff, that's definitely less sleep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Another cool thing that this introduced in the company is like containerization. So, all our applications now run inside of Docker. That's not to say that we couldn't have put our C# and Java apps in Docker to begin with, but using Node, it just made it so easy. And now it's permeated throughout the company. And so, all our new applications are deployed to Mesos, and scalability is much, much easier before. So previously, we'd have to provision more virtual machines, or a lot of this stuff, a lot of the code in OpenTable actually runs in our own data center. So I think Valentine's Day is like our biggest holiday. So previously, it would be perhaps a bit of work to scale up the night before, but now we're able to just click a button and be prepared.
Oh, that's awesome. Have y'all documented that or open sourced anything around the containerization? I know that y'all seem to have a lot of tooling that you've open sourced, which is much appreciated in Node.
Yeah.
But I know containerization is definitely something, and it is a more modern mystery.
Yeah, we do have a developer blog which has some of this information on it. Oh. We did open source a tool called Sue. This one's actually written in Golang. It's a little bit of a departure for us. But this tool is used for configuring Mesos and Singularity, which is our Mesos scheduler. And so we do that to make our deployments quicker and easier, and then there's a lot of documentation around that. We've open sourced some other stuff as well. Open Components is the most popular thing we've open sourced. And so that is used for creating like front-end components and then sharing them amongst other teams. And then you're able to load these components from your project using Semver. And then that way, without actually performing a new release of your application, the team that owns the components are then able to release changes, and then other teams can use them, which is really useful in a corporate environment where if you want to change that reservation button and you want it to affect multiple teams, using these open components makes it a lot easier.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah, I bet. So with that, I think our final question for you is, what are some of the things that you're really excited to do in the coming months with Node?
Oh yeah. So, well, recently we created, the team I'm on, we created a whole bunch of PRs to get all our teams up to Node LTS, Node 6. And so it was kind of fun getting that out, checking out people's projects, running the tests, getting the installs to work, figuring out what's broke, getting it up to getting everything up to date. So now I'm planning on doing that again once Node 8 becomes LTS. So hopefully in a month or two from now, and then the new async and await functionality that we get, which it takes these promises that we have and sort of makes them a first-class citizen with a new syntax. And I'm really looking forward to that, and introducing that in the company. Sort of the code that you write is much more elegant in the asynchronous control flow. Instead of downloading these complex libraries, it's now the first-class citizen with this new syntax. And I believe it's going to make the code a bit less buggy, easier to follow. It'll be easier for engineers to contribute to other teams. And then, yeah, we can pull up some libraries and even get some nice-looking stack traces.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Node 8 was I think such a fun release for us, and I'm excited for it to get to LTS. So I'm excited to see that as well. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Thomas.